Good morning. I'm David Beek, Dean of the School of Education and Behavioral Sciences at Middle Georgia State University, and welcome to our Ethics Awareness Week panel session. Today we are talking about and discussing machines and humans, the ethics of caring for each other. We are joined today by our wonderful panelists. We have Dr. Christopher Blake, President of Middle Georgia State University, Dr. Jonathan Jenkins, Professor of Computer Science. We have Katie Shepard, who is the Assistant Director of Instructional Design at the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And we also are we're privileged to be joined by a student today, computer science major, Miss Rima Beskar, who's also the chair of the Computer Science Club. So welcome. Let's give them a warm welcome. Ethical codes provide purpose-built guidance for making decisions about right and wrong. Ethics helps set expectations, reduce the energy spent reasoning through complex situations, and lead to more consistent behavior. Ethical codes are particularly useful in human relationships where power imbalances, trust, advice, guidance, or mentoring are involved. For the first time in human history, it's pretty amazing, you don't get to say that every day. For the first time in human history, we are now credibly talking about human-machine relationships. How astounding to even say those words in one sentence. So why don't I just say it one more time? For the first time in human history, we are credibly talking about human-machine relationships. So that makes this a new frontier. Panelists and audience members, as you think through the questions and scenarios that I've prepared, please keep in mind the broad range of emerging human-machine relationships. And these include, not exhaustive, these include AI tools serving as friends, chatbots providing medical advice and real-time health monitoring, counseling and psychological services, giving legal counsel, mediating disputes. And I wonder if at this point in human history we've had the first AI-mediated or chatbot-mediated divorce settlement. Something to think about. Machines as teachers and tutors. And finally, serving on the last line of defense, serving as human substitutes, AI tools serving as human substitutes on suicide and crisis hotlines. So all of these are a type of relationships. I was just talking with Dr. Blake just a moment ago. Back when I was in graduate school, studying to be a psychologist, we were very clear back then on the semantics of using the right words, which do signal meaning. And so we were told not to use that human beings have relationships, not humans and things. And so very purposely and intentionally challenging myself to use the word relationship while we're talking about human and machine interaction. So our broad overall question here is, what are the ethical considerations of these new types of relationships? And so we begin. So panelists, just for starters, tell us briefly about both your hopes and your fears more generally for AI. Who wants to begin?
I'd like to first of all extend a thank you for the organizers, for the people who've worked hard on this week, for this session, and to my fellow panelists and to Dr. B. Thank you for being here, and to those online. This is a topic of immense interest, but it takes work to get us together. So I'd like to start with an appreciation. And since I got the mic, I'll just simply say, I think the word relationship we use fluidly as human beings. I hear in any given day people have relationships with a divine being that they've never been around, seen, smelt, touched. They have relationships with their pets as their partners, as their best friends. They have relationships with their machines in their cars. I'm really fond of that car. I miss it since I sold it. So I don't think we're here in some qualitative distinction in talking about AI.
You want order then? All right. So in order then, here I am, right? So I think I want to be careful. I think my first instinct is to be careful about the context of relationship that's being used here. And I think I'm going to lean toward the broadest definition of that for the machine to person's quote relationships. My instinct is to challenge that use of that word because I think that only in the broadest sense is there a relationship between a human and a synthetic creation? So I probably should start with that and starting trouble here. You know, so that's probably my role here. I don't know. But I'll stop there for now. All right.
Well, I offer something maybe a little different. I think that we've seen a lot in the news about people having developed what they see as relationships with chatbots. You've seen some who have their marriage has dissolved because they find that the chatbot that they're involved with, if you will, seems to give them what their partner can't. And so while I think if we think about AI broadly, yes, we can't really have a relationship with a machine. But I think that if we're talking about it for the general population, they're seeing a response that appears to be so human-like to them that that's a relationship in their mind in a way that other relationships maybe haven't fulfilled that.
Well, I just point out this is already fantastic, and you folks are challenging even the concept of my question. I'll also.
No, you're grading us.
Well, I'm having ChatGPT graded actually as well. I noticed that so far nobody's answered the question, which is more generally or broadly, what are your hopes and perhaps concerns about AI? And maybe we'll have our student to teach us.
I have a lot of hopes for AI. I work with AI every day. I'm a software developer and student programmer for the School of Computing, and I'm working on developing educational platforms for MGA students to teach them coding. I'm working with the Air Force Base to integrate NLP into their project platform to track projects. And I don't think we can be careful, and I don't think PhDs should be careful necessarily. I think we have to make mistakes. That's the only way that we're going to be able to figure out how to regulate. And it's not just going to fall upon one discipline. It's going to be an interdisciplinary issue. It's not just going to be the developer. It's not just going to be the ethics committee. And it's not just going to be the users or the creators. It needs to be a combined effort. And I think we need to innovate. If someone told you 20 years ago that we'd all be glued, would you have believed them? No. You would have thought they were insane. So I'm sorry, I've just felt like I'm somewhat of a disruptor in my response, but that's my honest take. And the other concern is dependence. Dependence shifts a power dynamic, and dependence creates a power dynamic. And I think that's where we need to be careful, is the dependence. And the dependence also comes with privacy concerns. ChatGPT is not free. It's using you as a product to train their models. None of these products are free, and I think that needs to be exposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would add, I think that what you've heard up to now is, again, classic human projection. We've been talking about how people do use chatbots to find fulfilling, but that's a form of human psychosis. It's I'm going to find my comfort in something that others would say could be superseded by more human interaction. In short, we're tending to look at this as a projection. So when you say, what are my hopes and fears about AI, I'd turn that back and say there are actually hopes and fears about there's speculation about the future, which we all do, which none of us know, and it's all about humanity and ourselves. So I can't pull out AI as different from any speculation about where the path ahead for each of us individually and collectively lies. That seems to me a normal human activity. I'm a bit of a historian. It's largely fruitless. Most of history has unfolded in a way that at the time has not been anticipated, and I therefore don't put really any hopes and fears regarding AI. I am intrigued and curious. It's more cognitive than affective. I'm more curious about how we navigate the trials and errors. And I 100% agree. We should be comfortable with lots of errors.
Probably I guess I should try to endeavor to answer them, because I was too brief last time, I guess. But I think in terms of hopes, I thought about it. I think that I do hope that the tools, any such tools, will be used in a way that's constructive to humans, and not merely for the benefit of the creators of the tools. And then I also hope that, recently something, I've been thinking about this, but, recently I think I have a great hope that these tools will be revealed as instructive tools to teach us about our own limitations. So for that purpose, I think they have great value to teach us about our own, foibles and what we do in response to them. And so they're an instructive tool in that way. So I think they're, in terms of fears, I hope that they will not, further degrade our value for each other and our sensitivity to each other. So I think those are some fears that I'll just briefly put out there. Thank you.
I think I agree with you. I think a bigger fear for me, I do have deep fears because I'm somewhat pessimistic, and I come from a background of information science, and so AI has been very disruptive to that discipline because it feels like it's obliterated copyright in a lot of ways. But I think that while I do have those deep fears, there are so many opportunities, I think, to assist humans, especially stakeholders who maybe aren't as involved in the development of these tools. I think that that's also a fear, that if everyone isn't involved in how these tools are used and applied,
impact.
I'm feeling like I'm sort of beating the same drum here. I think we have bonds to all sorts of things. We sometimes celebrate inanimate object bonds, a bond to the planet Earth. But there's no rock, no geological structure that feels connected to me. It's the other way around. The relationality is going from the human to the inanimate. And in a sense, I say the question again, because there was a second point. I'm back on the first question. What was the second one?
The second one is, what might be the human impacts, psychological, societal, otherwise, on those who develop deep emotional bonds?
It's like being addicted to binge watching TV shows. It's like being obsessed about seeing the sports scores and not having a relationship. I'm picking bad examples, but not having a great relationship with your neighbors or your children because all you are is obsessed about something else. It is yet another way in which humans need to evaluate their choices about the nature and the genuine, authentic meaning they can derive from certain behaviors, responses, and relationships. It's not that AI uniquely poses a threat. People have felt bonded to TV anchors for 60, 70 years and felt they have a relationship with Savannah Guthrie in the morning and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a projection of our own mind and psychosis into something else that is not actually receiving it. It's a mirror that we're seeing and thinking is real.
Right, so I guess on emotional bonds, I have to be, I look pretty askance at that word, used in that way, because I think, again, I have to agree with Dr. Blake to some degree on that, because developing a bond with it, it's unidirectional. So really, in truth, it is unidirectional, and so that is in the mind of the person perceiving that, really. So it's not elsewhere. So I think that kind of that's instructive. Whether you can bond with it with something inanimate. Also, the other thing that I thought about is that we have analogs already, in existing sort of preoccupations that people can have that show us quite well what happens when they dump all of these resources, time, and invest energy into these things. And it's very likely to the exclusion of, things that are substantive in their lives, that are human. And so I also don't think that you can compare directly a bond with an object, quote unquote, and a bond with a human. I think there's no comparison in my mind.
Let me push back just a little bit with an example. So what's different about AI and other inanimate objects, of course, is it's actually seeking out interaction. And if, again, we got to do scare quotes for everything, apparently, seeking out interaction. But say a college student comes back to their room at the end of the day, opens up the chat bot, and it says, "I've missed you." That's different. Rocks don't do that. Cars don't, well, maybe cars do that nowadays. but isn't that different? Isn't it a difference of kind, perhaps?
Different, maybe minimally in terms of the extension of the sentiments. They're now extended from creators of software than in this case, so there's a transfer that goes on there. But nevertheless, that extension lost the humanity. It clearly lost the humanity, and so these are echoes, that they're not people. There are no people in the internet. They're all references. So, that's my first response, but sorry to try to bust up the program.
Nobody's allowed to apologize anymore. I love how feisty you folks are being. This is fantastic.
Maybe this sounds less academic, but I know that we're aware that those relationships aren't real, but the recipients still are perceiving them as real. I think there's a depth here that we're missing. We can analyze those relationships and say this is what we think it ought to be, but in reality, some people's experiences limit their ability to have human connections. And so I think that there still can be value, though these tools must be very specifically designed. I think there's a lot of consideration in how they should be created. But I think that regardless of how we know as we're viewing it externally, to those people, that's often real. So.
We are social mammals. We crave connection. And the truth of the matter is that in the 21st century, social isolation is becoming increasingly a major issue, especially amongst young people, elderly, all demographics. I think this is where we enter into a dangerous area because these bonds are inauthentic. There's no authenticity behind them. These are machines. They're trained in a way to give you a positive feedback loop. So you can speak to this chatbot in any way that you'd like, and it still provide a positive response, but what does that do for humanity? Does that train the younger generation that we can just talk to people any way we want, that we can just treat them any way we want, and they'll receive positive feedback? That there's no emotional context, there's no social cues that are being rendered between the recipient in that social interaction. So what are we actually creating here? We're creating an atmosphere of inauthenticity where one person is being manipulated by a machine that's mimicking human emotion. It's mimicking the emotion. It doesn't have emotion. You're interacting with something that's never been born and that's never going to die. And I think that's why there's a lot of hesitance, or there's a deep feeling in your gut that you get when you interact with something that's not authentic. Even when you find a person to be inauthentic, there's a deep feeling that you get inside of almost your soul that you feel about that interaction. And that interaction or that feeling is deception, is our intuition telling us that there's some sort of deception here. These machines are programmed in a way that's supposed to respond to you. And these machines are only learning in the way that the developer can program them to learn. So I think that these bonds are incredibly inauthentic, but after what she said, that there are, the humans are thinking that these bonds are real. They are being deceived. I think that's very true, and I think that's a really important point, and I think that's a major issue.
First of all, if I can just say, I'm very glad you're a student of Middle Georgia State. Throughout history, humans have believed in powerful ideas that cannot be scientifically or empirically verified. We construct, in philosophy, the real word for that is mythology, although the word myth has been devalued and debunked since the Enlightenment as meaning something wrong and false, and it doesn't mean that. Mythology is the collective story by which we can make sense of a somewhat, in some ways, capricious universe and the tentativeness of life and the finality of our own existence. And we've done that with other people. Traditionally, religion, which in Latin means two words, and think of the distinction, the nuance between them, to bind and to bond. Isn't that interesting? Religion binds you and it bonds you. Not lost on Tolkien and In the Darkness bind them in the Lord of the Rings. My point being that much of how we live our lives is in the stories we tell ourselves about reality, even in the absence of a confirmation, a real empirical confirmation of the validity of that. And thank goodness, I'm now going to say, that's the human story. That's how humanity has progressed, and that's what education does to lead us on to the next great story. But not all stories or myths, not all are of equal value. That's the point. I'll use a very one that I think in the West we should generally agree upon. The arrival of fascism in Europe in the 1930s was a bad mythology, a dangerous mythology. It caused untold suffering and delusion. And so it seems to me we're back to the same epistemological challenge in AI of what are the stories that we're going to create about ourselves, and how can machines help develop the better stories for us?
Truly fantastic. Thank you. All right, next we're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about sort of the outcomes associated with AI. So this gets at accountability in algorithmic care. And what a phrase that is. So AI-driven care algorithms are trained on vast data sets, as we know, which can include incomplete and even incorrect information. When such an algorithm makes a flawed decision affecting a patient's care plan, for example, who is ultimately accountable? The developer, the healthcare institution, or the human provider who relies on the recommendation? And just to bring that point home, how do we build in accountability when the algorithms go wrong?
Shall I go for it?
Go for it, please.
All right. So let's say in terms of flaws, so I probably, as a scientist, I have to mention when we go beyond machine learning, other forms of AI do not rely on such large data sets. So just we're condensing to machine learning here, really for this discussion, I think, or for the question. But I think defining flaw also needs to be done first. What is the violation that's there, and then from there we can proceed probably. But then algorithmics, in terms of accountability, I think it's difficult to get rid of the developer from that chain. However, as you said, you've got caregivers that are involved in the implementation of the decision, right? So there's a chain of roles that are involved there. It's difficult to get rid of pieces of that chain. It's difficult to get those out of there. But then in terms of accountability, and also another issue that I think about with that is we already have some evidence as to what it's like to attempt to hold developers accountable for software system failures. I think that speaks to probably a societal need to accept that. Does the society need to accept that we can actually blame someone for a software failure, developer, let's say? Because I don't see strong evidence that really is done yet, that acceptance. You did something with software and now I can blame you. I don't know. It doesn't seem like we've got strong evidence that it's there yet. But accountability, developers can be tracked very easily. Developers can be tracked, actions can be tracked. This is all trivial. So they can be tracked and definitely blamed. But if you have someone being harmed, in a care decision, then you have a chain of people involved there, and so it's hard to get rid of that, to sort of exclude that, right?
I think that everyone would be responsible. I think that the development of tools that you have to acknowledge some sort of impact that could happen. You can't guess everything, but I was reading recently about an AI-powered healthcare tool. And they found, after looking at the research, that the outcomes recommended were actually based on demographic information, and especially women's outcomes were, and their pain was disregarded. And then women of color were also discouraged from getting help when compared to someone else with different demographics. So those data sets for in a smaller way, and those sort of tools that they're finding practical applications for, are putting out and replicating issues. So the responsibility to me, for example, in that tool would be in the acceptance by the caregiver, because if it's a doctor, then you should always have, we use the phrase human in the loop. Anytime we're using AI, we need to make sure we have a human in the loop to make sure that we're analyzing the output. You're responsible for taking that output and that response and then applying it. And so I would argue that also backwards, if the company knows that the output is not quality, then they have a responsibility to try and rectify that as well. So I think the responsibility lies with everyone. It's an environmental thing.
First, on data sets. On data sets, there's always going to be bias. I'm developing a data set right now for the AI/ML educational platform that I'm building for students. And the data sets are based on levels of difficulty. So I asked the other day, I asked faculty, I said, how can I say that this is an easy question or this is a hard question? He said, you can't. You can't, they will be biased, the data sets will be biased. And in terms of caregiving is it's meant to be incredibly inefficient because it's meant to be messy or uncomfortable. That's what creates the trust and the empathy. It's not meant to be an incredibly efficient process, and algorithms are an incredibly efficient process. All algorithms care about is efficiency. They don't have empathy. And that, I think, is kind of a territory that is kind of divisive, is that you want to take something such as an algorithm and combine it with caregiving. How do you even do that in a way that you can say that there is accountability? I think it's almost irresponsible to say that there can be accountability in this area. Is responsibility and accountability the same thing? No, you can be responsible for something and you cannot take any accountability for it. So I think this kind of falls into an area that's going to end up as a legal territory, especially in healthcare and caregiving. And I think that that legal territory is going to come from ethics and civil rights and human rights. And I don't think those laws and those policies have been created yet. I think that there's going to be a lot of unfortunate events that have to occur for those policies to be created, and not just one, multiple, over and over and over again. And I think that it's going to be incredibly destructive, but I think something good can come out of it. And I think that we can innovate from there, but I think we're just kind of in a really, really dangerous area right now when it comes to healthcare and AI and caregiving. And are humans even ethical or accountable in caregiving? Have we even gotten there? I don't think we have, so.
I would agree, and I do think that we know the phrase bells and whistles. We're very attracted to shiny objects as humans, and AI can present us with a very shiny object. And actually, I've got a very small, I don't want to be too anecdotal, but I have diabetes and my phone shows what my blood read is at any given time. And it's doing fine right now. But my point being, when I went to the endocrinologist, and all the data's there, but she wanted to pull it up on her screen. I had to pay $100 for her to, and I said, well, can't you look at my phone? Well, I like to do it here. That got billed to me as $100 of doing study, when I'm like, but it's here, can't we talk about it? In other words, it seems to me that all the professions, the applied professional moments that we have, should celebrate the human relationship and the human opportunity and utilize the bells and whistles not as the distraction, but rather as just simply to facilitate what would be a more meaningful conversation. So it's a sort of a sense in which I think we're intrinsically drawn towards I'm a sucker for those magic shows. I went to a magic show recently at the beach, and I love that stuff. And I came back and bored the office talking about all the tricks. They're still just tricks. They weren't actually warping time, space in new physics formats. I mean, it looked that way, but they weren't. And yet, and I think the same allure is going on. There's an appeal of magic here, and let's just remember, it's just a trick.
Again, so far, thank you to the panelists. These have just been out-of-this-world responses, so thank you, folks, across the board. I heard just a little bit ago some talk about the relentless pursuit of efficiency that these algorithms are looking for. And so now we'll turn to that issue. So really, the overall headline here is it's about the messiness of being human. Newsflash, we're all humans and we're all pretty messy. and we're comfortable with messiness, right? So we're really talking about the erosion of humanity and the value of inefficient care, which is what Dr. Blake just described he received with his endocrinologist. So here's the question. The automation of care promotes greater efficiency and resource allocation. That's what it does. But at what point does at what point does our pursuit of convenience and efficiency begin to devalue the messy, complex, and quote-unquote inefficient human-to-human interactions that have historically defined caregiving? So just to put a finer point on that, how do we prevent a future where human connection is seen as a luxury, something that you perhaps have to pay a premium for, rather than a necessity?
I will kick off with that, because I actually don't think that's new. I mean, you go back through the 19th century, you look at the writing of Karl Marx, you look at the Industrial Revolution, you go back to the pre-industrial societies. We've been talking the same talk, and we always will. We're always about, there's not enough food, how do we divvy it up, how do I get the lion's share and you don't? Those are basic human. What we might be doing is doing it very rapidly now in a way that we haven't being able to acclimatize to the change that's going on. So when the Industrial Revolution comes along and you see the arrival of urbanization, you have a whole generation of children in the factories and going down the mines to start figuring out this is actually killing our family. But it takes 20 to 30 to 40 years to figure out that this isn't a very good use of human efficiency. Now the pace of change is one where I'm sure we're not catching our breath, let alone being able to process it in any really good theory of where does this lead us. That's the only real difference, it seems to me, is the rapidity of it, and that we as humans tend to work in a more, cycles of each day, each week, each month, each decade. At the moment, Middle Georgia's talking about a decade. It's a great little story. It's a good story. I actually think it is a good myth, a decade. On the other hand, a decade at the moment is going to see such change that wasn't around in the last decade. I don't think it's a new problem. It's maybe a quicker problem.
In terms of efficiency, so being a fan of algorithms, I guess I have to say, yeah, I mean, a well-designed algorithm is efficient, sure, but used for sort of efficiency versus caring for others and that. I think that as soon as you offload the care to something that's algorithmically driven, I think then the effect occurs. And then, the person or whatever was cared for then perceives the offload. And so I think at that point, that's where you're talking about the jump off occurs. So there it is, I think. And so I think that's the cost. The second question, I guess, was how do we prevent it, it being a luxury only, the human interaction, right? I think the first thing that I think of is to better capture the cost so that it is continuously visible to us, the cost of that, and also stop participating. That's my message. Stop participating in activities that train you to devalue other people. That's a little abrupt, maybe I am, but that's my first thing that I think of. So that's maybe a little much at once, but so go with that.
So far, what I'm hearing across multiple answers and questions is that we probably want to get a lot more intentional about how we're choosing to spend our time, right?
Training. That's your training. I think that's the training that you are going through, whether you realize that or not. All of your activities are training you in ways to interact with others, how you value them, how you're sensitive to them, So that is your training, whether it was official or not. And so stop doing it. Go back to how you were training before in order to value others. So.
And I want to say, as president of this university, our job is to apply that intentional element. How do we want to do that training? How do we want to lead people into ways of understanding to do the human thing better? So I'm sorry, I'm putting on my president hat and saying that if universities don't have the answer to that, we have no business being around.
So a concrete sort of example of that is how we at the CEDL talk about the use of AI when it comes to teaching every day, and how you would want to use it and how you would want to focus your efforts in other ways. So we all have a limited amount of energy and time in the day, and so we've encouraged faculty to consider ways in which the smaller things can be made more efficient. Maybe making a rubric, AI can help you with that. So that then you can start spending that time and focus and energy on ways of doing the human connection with your students. And so getting into that messy teaching part, to see where you're engaging with them, you can see the light in their eyes. So if we can find ways to use the tools to do the things that we have to do, and we can focus on the connection with people, I think that that's really key, especially in education.
I think the concept of efficiency and kind of a capitalistic free market is, especially with AI, is extremely problematic, and especially when we're talking about algorithms. And we also discussed, is this going to be a luxury? So this is my feeling on what will happen in terms of it being a luxury, is that once we find out it's not efficient or as efficient as we thought, it will go down. It'll kind of trickle down. It's kind of similar to why all public schools have Chromebooks now, but how 10, 15 years ago, only private schools had laptops in their classrooms. And now these days, everyone has a cell phone. If you're in a third world country, you have a cell phone. But a long time ago, it was an item of luxury. Once we find out that these technologies are not as shiny and new and efficient as we thought they were, that's when they will become they will cheapen, and that's when they will lose their integrity, and that's when I think it will become an extremely dangerous area. And then the issue of the algorithmic aspect of it being automated. When you automate something, you are taking the human connection aspect out of the picture. At that point, you are turning that human into just another number or another product, similar to how factories automate their processes. And that's why there's a lot of issues in factories. That's why there's a lot of issues in areas that use AI and that use technology. There's tons of accidents all the time because those processes are automated. Because automation, it doesn't think critically, and it doesn't think conceptually, and there's no emotional context there. There's no emotional response. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, we'll shift gears a little bit here and talk about the actual data that's used to train these tools. And to train the caring machine. So this is about data privacy, consent, and the caring machine. Machines that care rely on intimate, personal, and health data to function effectively. As we increasingly consent to share this data with machines, and did we consent to do that? Where do we draw the line to protect privacy, particularly for vulnerable populations like children and the elderly? How can we ensure that consent is truly informed when the data itself and its long-term uses, such as for algorithm training or commercial purposes, are opaque to the user, and in some cases opaque to the developers?
I should have said at the beginning, I will give an apology. I'm going to have to leave in 10 minutes. I've got a downtown meeting at 12:15. I think we have chosen as a species to expose ourselves quite openly, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook or any social media, whether it's the fact that now we have targeted advertising, picking up your, I might mention something at the dinner table about, well, Turkey might be interesting, and I don't mean the food, I mean the place, Turkiye, as it's now said. And I'll get ads from Turkish Airlines appear immediately on my phone. In short, we have chosen to be bells and whistles about exposing our identity. That is risky on many levels, certainly even financially, and we could find our identity being stolen. But I think at the moment, the horse has already bolted. It's probably not going to be pragmatic to think you can retain the level of privacy that you would have been prior to the arrival of the cell phone. And I don't know where we go with it, except I do think this is where universities can have an ethical role in helping people to understand their humanity and how much of it they wish to share and how much of it they wish to retain, and the relational agreement that needs to go into healthy relationships to do that, and how the bells and whistles of technology and AI can be a threat to that. It doesn't have to be. It's only if the human chooses to permit that.
So for privacy, yeah, it's a big one. I think that the rapidity, with which software is able to transmit information, that's facilitated kind of a fast movement, and an interest in sort of expose for service, right? Get the service. Well, give us first consent to, X, Y, Z, ABC, and all that many people say they never read, right? All the long documents that say, sign this first before you can use X, Y, Z. The privacy aspect, I think that, the consent was the issue, right? That was the question, mainly the consent part. So it can become, as you mentioned about the vulnerable, right? The vulnerable, there can be an issue with obtaining informed consent. This makes me think of, this is a flashback to years ago when one of the faculty at my university was working on voting systems and discerning intent, discerning voter intent. So that was interesting. But getting consent, though, with the vulnerable, I think there can be a challenge in actually forming credible consent, right? So it's actually credible that they consent to having this release. You can have ways to sort of manufacture consent by maybe sort of abstractions, that sort of make it a kind of consent. Maybe you can infer it from other aspects of the person that's being asked for the consent. There are technical ways you could do that probably, but then I think that opens up a target for misuse if there is such an artificial consent kind of mechanism. But in this case, I think our greatest strength probably in solving that one, even when you've got a vulnerable person who has to consent, are probably our greatest strength, and our most constructive strength is probably collaboration here, in order to get that done. Not easy, but if you're in that situation where you've got a vulnerable person that needs to give consent, then finding a way to collaborate well enough is the best you can do, probably. So probably go with that.
Yes, there's a website I found where you can enter the terms of use, and it explains it in plain terms, if you will, which of course will not be exactly what the terms are, but there have been attempts to make tools that allow people to understand exactly what they're agreeing to. Some of my pessimism is coming out in this one, in that I think that regardless of what we consent to, it's always going to be more than you think, only because we can't guess how they can use or will use that information down the road. So if you consented, like when I consented to put my information on MySpace back in the day, that was very different than how we consent now, say, to a Facebook profile. And so I think, unfortunately, that ship has sailed when it comes to privacy in a lot of ways. Sometimes that's because you have to consent to giving some of your information away for other reasons. I don't find that to be super negative, though, because I feel like we're all in the same boat, and we should just assume, it's out there, it is what it is. Now, obviously, I don't mean your social security number, but like that my name is Katie and that I am 38 years old or whatever. I think that when it comes to caregiving, again, yeah, it's gonna be the same thing, and I'm agreeing with you. I think that some of these things we're consenting to, we're just not going to know down the road what it becomes and what it is. So we just hope for the best in what we have and weigh the outcome as we have it now. And I agree, collaboration and communicating about the truth of how information is used is the key, because I think there's a lot of assumptions that companies will take care of you. I got bad news that you're not taking care of your information isn't always their number one choice. So that's kind of an answer, kind of not an answer.
We will sell our data and we will sell our privacy for convenience, and we will do it willingly, and it will be marketed as informed consent. That's already what's happening. That's what's happened with cell phones, technology, social media, the Patriot Act. We are constantly selling our own data and our privacy for convenience, for products, so that we can use them. And then someone might say, well, then I can't have a Facebook profile, or then I can't use ChatGPT. So it's a transactional kind of process, and it's going to happen. We're already there, as they have said. We're there, and I think it's a place that we can't come back from. And these companies, especially in healthcare, they will sell the data, and they'll sell them. For example, 23andMe, those DNA tests to figure out your lineage, they took that DNA and they sold it to Google. And then Google bought it, Google Nest bought it. Nest is actually the thermostat inside your house, that AI thermostat. They're tracing behavioral patterns to figure out how to sell more products to you. So that data will be sold, and it will be marketed as informed consent. You know, you will click, I accept the terms and conditions every single time. And that's convenience as well. That's a trade-off for convenience. Do you want to sit there and read 100 pages of legal jargon just to use a product that you need or possibly need right away? And I think that, these types of interfaces will pop up in, before you commit actions. And there's a design to that. There's a, user interface, user design that they methodically design into these technologies to be manipulative, to have you, just click yes. Why are the terms and conditions in font size 4? Why is it the last thing that you see? You give them all your information, you're ready to go, you're registered, you're excited about this new product, and then it's like, oh, well, just check this tiny little box. So I think, informed consent does exist, but when it comes to technology, I think we're way past that point. I don't really think there's anything that's private anymore at all. Even if a company's telling you there's really not. So, even the reason that you get money off of your premium for your car insurance is because you download that app on your phone for Progressive, right? And they're actually selling that data to the health insurance companies. It's already happening. The health insurance companies are already selling your data to the other private corporations. It's already part of the game. And there's really no way to make it ethical at this point. We can call it ethical, but
Can I? I'm about to walk up, but I would. What we just heard was so important, and it strikes me that the job of our generation is that the elementary school children, if you know anyone young in your life, they're growing up in a world in which they will have an AI assistant, buddy, friend, reality on their. Or will be machine reality on their shoulder for the rest of their days. So we need to ask ourselves as educators, so what is then the goal that we're looking to create in our graduates and in the educational process that young people will go through before they come to university and then beyond? Middle Georgia I'm very proud of this. We've got an applied AI undergraduate degree. That is a huge opportunity. And what I think we have heard in my colleagues and I is it's not just about utilitarian application. It's not just simply how to be quicker and more efficient or more glossy with the bells and whistles. It's pushing to a deeper question of where is the human relational community to be found in a world rapidly evolving in that way. But you give me inspiration and make me feel optimistic. So to my colleagues, can I say thank you for being part of my morning? And thank you, David, for organizing it. Please excuse me, everyone.
So just to jump continue, I guess, probably I'll chime in on that also. In terms of exposure of personal information, I think a word of caution is probably warranted here. So you still have your own decisions to make. And, I personally don't include myself in that group that thinks that they have to be part of all these platforms and all of that. I'm not in that group. But the second thing about a word of warning, I think, is that remember that you're still in a culture and you have an ability to contribute to a culture in terms of how you treat those who don't want to expose all that information. So remember that the next time that someone tells you that, well, I'm not going to give out that information. Just remember how you're treating them, and remember that you have a role in the culture of how they're created and what happens to them too. So those who don't want to share everything, and they have decisions to make too. It's their information. So.
I think that there's actually a social design where you almost become a pariah if you don't accept the terms and conditions and you don't use these products. If you, like he said, you should be accepting of these individuals if they say, I don't want to share that information. But if someone says, hey, do you have a LinkedIn? Do you have an email? Do you have a Facebook? And you say no, there's an immediate social response there. And I think that is made by design by these tech companies. They want to create a sense of social isolation that eats you alive to the point where you do give in. And I think that is very insidious. But as what he said, to piggyback off of that, I do think we should be more accepting of people that don't want to share their information. They should be applauded.
Well, so there is a final question, but I think if we've all done a good job listening and being engaged, which I assert we most definitely have, I think we can probably anticipate your folks' answers. So what I'll do is I'll pose the question, and then if you could just give a very quick kind of up, down, or just some brief thoughts about it, and then maybe use a minute or two to share any final thoughts that you might have that you want to share with us. So here's the final question. The relationship between humans and AI is often framed often or sometimes framed, well, as any relationship is, as a symbiotic relationship. So in other words, a two-way street. But what happens when the human is dependent on the machine for care? And more to the point, and we've largely already explored that question, but more to the point, what about the other direction of the relationship? Does the human owe anything to the machine, to the algorithm? Which is, so again, I think we can probably anticipate your folks' answers to that, but feel free to answer that and then share any final thoughts with us. Well, sorry, well, the algorithm told me already what your answer was.
Well, yeah, all right. So then this is a big one, I think, in terms of, having the symbiotic relationship between a human and some synthetic creation. I think, wasn't it also, it was about like an ethical obligation to the machine, is that right?
Yeah, what kind of ethical obligation do we have to the machine?
All right. So then, with this one is an interesting one, right? I think, in my case, I have trouble finding a unique ethical obligation to an object or any synthetic creation. But, however, in today's context, though, you have to face the situation that, your obligations to that creation or tool, or your disregard for it, that may impact other people. They may have a dependence or a need for that device, that service, so your disregard for it could affect others. And then after that, this is another thing. I think that some people they observe an ethical obligation to whatever it is, because of their own obligation due to their own beliefs as to how you treat and care for whatever it is. So the synthetic whatever it is, I don't know. So you may have that obligation because of your obligation to your own beliefs about how you treat and care for, what is under your care. I'll say it that way. So that it could come into play that way, right? So final thoughts, I guess. Final thoughts. Yeah, I think. My biggest thought probably is about training, and so there's a bigger context here, in terms of offloading care to any devices, any synthetic creations. There are bigger context there, and so everything we do with that is in a larger context of what sort of effects that it has on us over a longer time scale. When you look farther into the future, what are the effects on us in terms of training ourselves as to what's expected of us and other people? So am I training myself in order to not expect of myself that I should care for others? Am I training myself for that, or is the caregiver being trained, and also the person receiving the care being trained to not expect others to intentionally, personally think about us while we're being cared for? Are we training them to be that way? So, we're in a context where we're continuously being trained for the future effects that are coming. So that's probably my biggest thing, but I'll allow others to continue. Thanks.
I don't really care about the machines and the ethics related to the machine, to be completely honest, but I'm also aware that I'm in two minds of this because I also use please and thank you when I talk to it. So I don't know that I have a straight answer on that one. This one was a question that I'm still thinking on, and I don't have much more of an answer to that, but I feel like there's a chance for more empathetic people like me to forget that I am not talking to another person, and then I will spend a lot of time and effort doing something that is not a good use of my time or emotions. And then I guess final thoughts. I look forward to 23andMe and Google making a clone of me one day. I've forfeited that. I'm okay with it.
I believe our ethical obligation to machines and AI, I believe we do have one, and I believe that obligation is our humanity. I think we do need to think about how we treat the machines and how we do treat AI, because if we don't, we will lose our humanity. We will lose our empathy. We will lose our sensitivity and everything that makes us human. Even my houseplants, I think about how I treat them. I think about how I treat that spider in the corner of my garage. Is that ridiculous to some people? Sure, it's ridiculous. But, and I do use please and thank you when I speak to the AI, because if we don't and we just see everything as a transactional relationship, then who will we become in the future? And what will the younger generations become? So I think that we do have an ethical obligation there. I think we do need to treat the technology with humanity, because for every input there will be an output. And in terms of just overall thoughts, because we are in a university setting as educators and innovators and students, I think we're in a great place to train the users of how to use AI. I think that this is a great environment to, we sat here talking about ethics and innovation in AI. This is a great place. This is a great institution to train the users. We have every opportunity to do that, to teach students, to teach faculty, to teach anyone under our wing how to use the AI, how to use it in a way that's efficient, how to maximize productivity, how to use it with humanity. So those are my final thoughts.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I think it'd be hard to conclude with anything better than what you folks just shared. So thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. I think if we've learned anything in this hour, this time together, is that there's a yearning to have these kinds of discussions, and so I'll work with leadership to see if we can't have an ongoing series of these kinds of dialogue. So thank you, folks, and thank you for your attendance.